This is quite a long letter, so I'm just going to quickly read it. I've always believed that people grow most when you give them space. I try hard not to be a micromanager. I give my team full ownership, trust them to figure things out, and avoid stepping in too quickly, even when I see them struggling. I believe a good struggle shapes us for success. But lately, I've started to wonder if I have swung too far in this direction. One of my team members was leading a high-stake project, and I consciously held back from interfering, even when I sensed it was going off track. I didn't want to undermine his confidence, but things didn't go well. Balls were dropped, and I had to scramble to fix things last minute. My boss immediately gave me feedback. Sometimes I think you are over-empowering. It's like you have blind faith in your team. That's what the boss said to him. You see, I want to be the kind of leader who trusts and empowers. But now I'm second guessing myself. Was I trying so hard not to be a micromanager that I became too hands off? Did I overestimate their radius? Or was I avoiding tough conversations just so I wouldn't be seen as overbearing? How do I balance giving them a good struggle with appropriate oversight without making my team feel like I don't believe in them? So I think it's a classic case of learning when to let go, delegate, and trusting the team, or over-empowering the team. Any thoughts when you first hear or read this letter?
I think it is an interesting challenge all of us face, right? How much of it we do it ourselves? How much of it you delegate? I mean, I'm going to give an analogy of the sports, right? You have a captain of the team, and let's take the football analogy, and you happen to be the goalkeeper as a captain, right? Assume, right? Now you have a defender, you have a midfielder, and you have somebody who's in the attack, right? Front. Now you have to trust that the person who's in the front lines, who's forward striker, knows his job and how he's going to strike and how he's going to convert a goal, how he's going to take the penalty. You are a goalkeeper by function, but you're a captain because of your leadership skills. Now, if you become a controlling person to basically say, should I delegate or should I take the strike myself when the penalty stroke comes? Right?
Yeah.
So at that point, I want to highlight this point. There are people in your team because of functional competencies. There are reasons why they're there. So giving them the responsibility based on their functional competence is your role, is your job. So it's delegation there is okay. But if you basically have a day where your striker forward is injured or he's been yellow carded or whatever, he's not able to come, and then your midfielder is going up there, your job is to give confidence to the midfielder to be able to take that penalty
Yeah.
stroke, right? Rather than um, undermine their confidence. So it's an important situation. It happens in work all the time. Um, Having the nuance of understanding what to delegate based on people's competency, existing skill set, what to delegate based on a learning stage that I want to delegate it to you because it will help you grow into your next role. And being aware that there is going to be skill gap, and therefore I have got to oversee this in periodic moments and make sure that the outcomes are achieved is the next part. And the third is to basically delegate because that person has got an experience to flawlessly execute, right? And therefore, um, becoming aware as a leader on your team's capability and their growth journey informs on how you delegate or not, right? If you delegate something which is extremely out of the competency set of your juniors, they do not want to say no to you. They take it on and they don't deliver. You do multiple things that are damaging. One is you are damaging the confidence of your team because they took it on, they didn't deliver, and therefore they have suddenly gone into a phase of low confidence. Then you have underdelivered from your business perspective, and therefore you're answerable to your leadership to say why this thing didn't happen. And therefore it has a double impact or a triple impact. So being aware of the competency set of your team, what is the level of challenge that you're bringing into the table, and how are you supervising that becomes important. Delegation doesn't mean not supervising. Delegation means you've given somebody the task, and as a manager, you need to have an oversight of that task. So it's important that you have that nuance.
If I can kind of like sum it up what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, please push back if I got it wrongly. So what you are saying is that I think it's a version of the Eisenhower matrix, right, of importance and urgency. But I think what you have put in is another level of looking into the competency or the readiness of the people as well, to consider that. So it's not just about whether or not it's an urgent task or whether it's an important task, but to also look into whether or not the team is ready to take it on as well, whether or not they have got the right skill sets, right? So, so taking that into account, so like for example, if it is a situation where the team is extremely ready, high readiness, and the importance and the urgency of the task is low, then I think it's a very good case to delegate that, because they can do it and there's not much urgency, right? It's the best situation to delegate. But you also mentioned that there are certain things that the manager themselves need to also hold on and do not delegate as well. I think that's very important. I think that's where a mistake which I did before, because to me in my head, those days when I was a young manager, I thought delegation means whatever is on your plate, you delegate 100% of it, and you just kind of like monitor like a dashboard, right? And that's where I realized that there are certain things that as a manager in this case, there are things that you wish there's no one else that can do it but you yourself. You have to be able to, you are responsible and accountable for those things, right? Especially those things which has high importance and urgency. For example, like a crisis that you're going through, or a top client saying that they are probably going to decide to move on to another agency, for example. Those are very critical things, and as the leader in this case, those things you cannot delegate, right? What
Yeah.
more if your team is so-called, their readiness is very low? You don't delegate those things at all, right? You need to be able to hold on to those things. So that is a very extreme in this case, right? Then you also brought in another layer of like supervising, right? So when do you supervise? So like you said,
Yeah.
delegation is not just only about delegating and then you just walk away, right? So there's this thing about situation of monitoring as well. So I think like cases of, for example, if there is the team is highly ready, they have the will to do it, they're also ready to do it as well. And if the task is also very important, I think that is where you can delegate, but you need to monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is kind of the matrix I'm thinking about. It's almost,
Yeah, I mean, the Eisenhower matrix is a great matrix to think about prioritizing work,
yeah,
right? A big part of that is it helps you eliminate work that is not important and urgent. And that's super important because sometimes this is the task that is done, therefore it is there in the job list. And a lot of times, right, the delegation happens and then the fulfillment doesn't happen because of capacity issues. People don't know how much capacity is there in their
yeah.
teams, and big part of that capacity is taken up doing routine work, which may or may not have impact on the business. So, actually, constantly looking at that work list to see what is important, what is not important, and what is urgent, what's not urgent, and getting rid of stuff or automating stuff that is not urgent and important creates capacity, and that's sometimes 30-40% of a team's capacity utilization, right? Then you rightly said, right, if it's highly urgent but it's not important, then there is an opportunity for you to delegate it to your team and supervise it. It's not important, so if it messes up a bit, then it's okay. There is you can still recover, right? But it is urgent. and you don't have capacity yourself to do it, but give that opportunity your team to take it on. It tests them, it trains them, it elevates them, right? And then if it is important and urgent, and you do not have capacity as a manager and you need your team to do it, be in the trenches with them.
Yeah.
Just don't give it to them and then forget about it. You need to be in that part. Synthesize this Eisenhower matrix into some first principles of delegation, right? If you will let me
Yeah.
articulate that, Carson, right? One is, it's something again I learned from sports, right? And being an Indian and following in cricket quite a bit, big fan of a couple of recent captains that Indian cricket team has seen. Where the first principles of delegation here is, right, clearly articulate outcomes when you're delegating, and do not dictate the process, because the folks in your team are knowledgeable enough. That's the reason why they are there. Functional competency is there. That's why they're in your team. So articulate the outcome and not the process. Okay. If it is a new thing, verify the process, which means mitigate risks. So they say, when you're delegating something, I want you to do a presentation about millennials, insights about millennials, for example. That's the outcome that you're defined. Then rather than say, I want you to do these 10 steps to come up with the insights on millennials or Gen Z, whatever that might be. So once you articulate the outcomes, then you ask your team to come back and say, what is your process to get to this outcome? And having listened to that process, you try to mitigate the risks that will come that the team has not thought through. And then as the work gets commissioned, assess the process, not the outcomes. Now, this might be a little con counterintuitive. When the work is done,
Yeah.
the outcomes might be whatever it is. Of course, you're judged on the outcomes, but assess your team's delivery on how well they followed through on the process.
Got it.
If you do this right, clearly articulate the outcome, verify the process, and measure the process. How did you do this job? Over time, the outcomes will take care of itself, right? Now, when you go through this, when you're verifying the process, you will also gauge the competency set of your team, where there are gaps, where you need to lean in into support. How that comes into the part of mitigating risks. You're supposed to go and talk to a journalist about this insight, but you've never interacted with the journalist before. So, hey, go prepared with 10 sets of questions. Don't free ball in that conversation, because the journalist will be most productive when you give them a very clear framework
Yep.
when you're giving insights. When you're going to a consumer and asking for a point of view, have open-ended questions rather than yes/no questions. So those are the things that one can come in with the point of view as a leader, right? So prioritizing the workload based on urgency and importance. And when you're delegating, focusing on outcomes, verifying the process and giving mitigating risks on the process. And then as you're evaluating your team, outcomes are outcomes, and that's a function of how the process was executed. Measure of the process that are put in place were followed, not followed, what are the deviation, give feedback on that. When you do this cycle again and again, the outcomes will take care of itself. And that's my personal journey, and that's how something I have gained working with teams, right? Um, I've also had micromanagers where they basically ask you to do something. When you're doing something, they have done that stuff themselves. I have seen my own team members in the past who have delegated writing a new business deck to their young team. The young team has worked 24 hours, 36 hours to turn it around because they want to impress their leader. And when the leader sees the work, they say, oh, this is rubbish. Let me rewrite it. And they rewrite it in 30 minutes themselves because they can do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What has happened in those instances is you're given somebody a chance to write a deck, 36 hours they took to do it, knowing fully well that you can do it yourself in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But instead of appreciating the process, you're judging the outcomes. not realizing that there's a learning curve involved. And when you dismiss that outcome and you come up with your own deck in 30 minutes, it just demolishes their confidence
Yeah.
and they will kind of lose their mojo,
Mm,
right?
mm,
That is not leadership. Leadership is basically giving people the opportunity to do the work. And again, this is something that's a nuance you have to think, right? It is not dumping work on people. You're giving people the opportunity to grow when you delegate.
mm,
And when you give people the opportunity to grow, you also have to realize that there is a learning curve involved, and therefore it will not meet the standards that you will achieve on your own because you have done that 100 times yourself.
mm,
So being tolerant to that gap that you can deliver versus what the team can deliver, because that you're giving them a growth journey and helping them elevate the product to your standards over time will give you longer term success. And most importantly, if your purpose is to enable people, that is how people will grow. And that is where you can take off the training wheels and let them ride the cycle themselves. If you're micromanaging constantly, then you cannot take the trainer wheels off.
I got it. I think if we had this conversation when I was a much younger manager, I would have lesser heartache of dealing with some of the mistakes and failures which I've done in not even understanding what is delegation, right? Then also, I think the whole area of micromanaging, the definition of it. So perhaps for me personally, I struggle with the word micromanaging when I was much younger at that time, is because I was in a situation where my boss micromanaged, defined here as do it this way, step by step, follow my way, right? So to me, I took it as micromanaging, right? So that is my definition of it. And as a result of it, so I told myself that if I will ever be a manager myself, I will not do those things, right? But I over so-called indexed on it. So I didn't even, like what you said, articulate the outcome. I think that's very important, right? I think to articulate the outcome, but not the process. But what my former manager have done before is that they articulated not only the outcome but the process as well. So I hated that because there was no agency, there was no creativity, right, for me to get to where it is. So that's where I told myself, no, I will not be that kind of manager. So as a result of that, I
Over index on,
over
yeah.
index, over empowered, and so on to kind of say. So I think I relate to this person as well. So when this letter writer said that struggle is the best way to learn, I think that was also my thoughts is like, well, I guess you just got to throw this person into the deep end and let the person figure it out in this case. But what you have said, which was really helpful, is that yes, struggle is still important, but you need to be able to articulate very clearly what is the outcome. So the struggling is in the process, right? But the outcome needs to be
And as
articulated.
a leader, verify the process. You ask them, say, okay, this is the outcome. How are you going to go about it? Come
Yeah,
up with your
yeah,
solution. Then, rather than you might not agree with the outcome, with the process,
yeah,
right? But give them the benefit of doubt. You call out the risks. If you follow this process, check out these are the couple of risks that you need to watch out for.
yes,
Let them stumble, let them fall, let them pick themselves up,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then once the task is done, it's easy for us to say whether outcomes were achieved or not. And that could, if the outcomes might be achieved, but the process might not be followed. And therefore, you're not setting your team for success in the future, right? So it's important to go back and see what is the process that you follow to achieve this outcome, and therefore, is there any process optimization? So, doing the basics right and focusing on the task and focusing on the actions is more important than um later on saying, okay, you achieved the success, hook or by crook, I don't really care what you followed, right? So that also is a dangerous situation. The other thing, Kausan, I was constantly, and you and I discussed this a lot about in our morning walks,
yeah,
is, managing versus enabling, right?
yes,
The entire conversation around managing uh, or micromanaging
yeah,
comes from the position of power, right? I'm managing you, you are managing me, that has a power hierarchy, right? And I think that does not bode well in an environment where people have grown up in a more egalitarian society, more equal status play, right? So, enabling to me has a better resonance than managing. So, as a leader, stop thinking about managing, start thinking about enabling, right? Uh, and the other thing is, this is again difficult, and especially in a culture where everybody is constantly evaluated based on what they bring to the table, is to basically let go of taking credit, right? When you're a leader, you're an effective leader when you stop taking credit for your team. Let the team, you know, benefit and enjoy the credit of the work they do. And giving that credit to the team creates so much empowerment and energy that you'll never ask this question about how do I delegate or not,
Yeah.
because people will come to you and say, give me more.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Um, let me try to.
That was fun conversation. Let us see how you're able to
Let me try
summarize
to
that.
recap here. I think that the first thing is we talk about the what to delegate, how to delegate, and so on. So then we talk about, in essence, the task, right? So we had a version of Eisenhower matrix, but we included the element of the readiness of the people, right? In terms of the competency. So as much as we look into the importance and the urgency, we also need to look into the area of how ready our people is in this case. And we look into additional things like, for example, it is not just giving everything to the person to do, but also put in an element of supervising as well, right? I think there's this concept called scaffolding, right? And to understand that if it's too much for the person, then the person will feel overwhelmed. And most of the time, like what you said, as juniors, they may not want to push back. They want to please you, so they kind of say, "Yes, I can do it, boss." But after that, then they don't. So it's to be able to give them scaffolding to help them from step by step in this case. But also we talk about there are certain situations where you do not delegate at all, where you have to take it on upon yourself to deliver those things which are business critical, right? Then we moved on to say that besides learning how to delegate, but there's also this thing called managing expectations as well, right? And managing expectations here is to articulate clearly the outcome. That's number one. But you do not control or do not articulate on the process, but allow your people to come back to you, how are they going to tackle that? So articulate the outcome, not the process. Two is to verify that they are actually on the right track. That's where the supervision comes in. And the last is to measure the outcome, right? Sorry, to measure to measure both in the sense that to understand that the outcome, whether it has succeeded or not, but to then debrief and study where the process went wrong, because that's an input goal and the other was an output goal, right? So it is articulate, verify, and to measure that. And then we talk a little bit about psychology as well in terms of why people would like to even micromanage, to manage the process as well, is because they're probably coming from a position of power, right? And it's to shift, to reframe from power to enabling or power to empowering, right? So I think that is a much better approach, right? A different kind of power.
Mm, mm,
And we also talk about, I think it's not being said, but I thought I need to mention this. I think there's a lot of intentionality as well, right? So if you come from a position, the first principles of that, I'm here as a leader to be able to bring out the best, to be able to empower, to be able to help people to grow, if that is the value that you have, then you're going to be very intentional in all these steps. So as much as someone can learn, the Eisenhower can learn about what to say, to say the right things at the right time, but you don't have the right heart or the right understanding or the right value, then you also will come across as inauthentic, right? Or over-engineering this, right? Because, like you say, people go through the learning curve. So if you understand that it's about giving the opportunity for growth to that person, then you'll be more tolerant, you'll be open to supervise more and to understand that ultimately it's for your best. That's why I am, being very intentional about such things. And lastly, you talked about letting go of the credit as well, right? Taking credit, especially in our culture, right? So I think that is what I've captured. Did I miss out anything?
No, you didn't. And I kind of noticed the struggle you had when you basically said assess or measure the outcome and not the process. The reality is we are trained to measure outcomes, trained to measure success, trained to measure
Yeah,
failure.
yeah,
We are not trained to measure and assess the steps that got us to that outcome.
yeah.
So it's a struggle. Even for the best of us, the default position is to say, so what happened? Did it get achieved or not? The thing is, 9 out of 10 times it will be achieved, but if nine of those processes were wrong processes to achieve, it is not a sustainable outcome, right? You are putting pressure on the system to basically get to the end goal, and that's not sustainable. That's when burnout happens. So, constantly reviewing and optimizing the process is the way to basically ensure that sustained outcomes are achieved in a sustainable way. So that's a thought for you to reflect on.
Okay, thanks for that. So hopefully the letter writer has gotten some things as well. I think just to throw in one more thing before we wrap up for today's conversation, you talk about outcomes as well as the process. I wonder if the letter writer also would is the kind of person who would probably associate his or her worth or identity with the outcomes as well, right? So I think why I'm saying this is because I struggle with that, right? I struggle with that to say that if the outcomes doesn't come out exactly how it is, then I would question myself to say, oh, am I a good leader? Have I been? Then I beat myself up, especially for someone who is a very outcome-driven person like myself. But what you
So
have done,
let's take example, Kausern of the recent French Open, right?
yeah,
There were champions in the final competing against each other. Both of them followed a process. One won, the other didn't.
yeah,
Does it mean the other person has to beat himself? The person who didn't
you're
win,
right,
who was a runner-up,
yeah,
beat himself up
yeah,
because they didn't achieve the winning.
yeah,
They should go back and assess what steps they followed, what are the processes that they put in place to get to this final, and what really made the difference at the 11th hour.
yeah.
My judgment is that both of them would have been extremely competent players. They have same caliber, they have that same intensity and intentionality and training, etc. There would be one or two process optimization
Yes.
the winner would have done, which the runner-up wouldn't have
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
And therefore, paying attention to that is what will help you achieve the desired outcomes.
So thanks for validating that. I mean, with another sports analogy, and I think what I learned is that the outcomes is not a reflection of who I am, right? But it's a reflection of the process in terms of like, so if the outcome didn't happen, then let's look at the strategy. Let's look at the process.
Yeah.
How do we optimize those things, and stop beating myself up to say, oh, am I a bad person? Am I, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that is something which I am continuously trying to improve myself as well as a leader. Yeah. So let's come to a wrap. I am
Yeah.
just wondering, were there any aha moments for you? Were there any points which you thought was quite interesting for you throughout this 1 hour?
I think there are a few thoughts, right? One is to make me reflect on my own leadership journey because a lot of times you do go in a default mode. And then preparing for this conversation made me reflect and be more intentional about leadership. So that is good. That made me reflect on this part about outcomes versus process. We constantly say this. We see that best people go through this. And the reason why I've emphasized that process over outcomes is that it allows you to pick yourself and fight the battle again the next time. If process optimization is there and you win, and then you can improve the process, then you can actually do that win even better with bigger margins. If they win, if you lost, but you focus on the loss rather than focus on how you can optimize, then you're putting yourself into a rabbit hole, which is difficult to dig yourself out of. So I think for me, that was a big aha moment again to basically say, what do you focus on? But more importantly, right, just to have this conversation with you reminded me of my 30 years of my work experience and leading through. The question that one asks is, who's a leader? I think everybody should be a leader in their own right, regardless of what their position is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also a function of mindset shift,
Yeah.
which is I'm a leader not because I have the power. I'm a leader because I'm able to enable other people to realize the potential, enable myself to realize the potential. So I think when we think in that format, think in that context, I think all of us give ourselves the permission to lead,
Mm.
not wait for a designation or a title.